Hi everyone, I'm Phaedra from Phaedra Garden S. This is a gardening channel and we have a flower farm in northeast Victoria in Australia, and we have a beautiful climate, a beautiful area. We're surrounded by amazing rolling hills. We get a little bit of snow up behind us in the winter, but other than that we are very cold in the winter, but we don't get snow where we are. We are similar to a zone 8B in the US, but we're one of the colder zones in Australia. So in today's video, I want to just sit down and just have a bit of a chat about a reflection on 2023 and moving into 2024. I want to talk about a few things that I'm leaving in last year and a few things that I'm either continuing with in 2024 or that I want to bring in to this year. So go grab yourself a nice drink or a chocky or whatever it is that you like to sit down and listen to things with. Otherwise, I'm just sitting here. I'll be putting a few pictures up and down. You're fine to listen to this as more of a podcast if you want to go and do something and have this in the background. So first up, let's start with what I'm leaving in 2023. So what I want to stay in last year. One of the major things is roadside sales, which may be a little bit surprising for anybody who's been here for a while following us, because that has been a major part of our income. Going back 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago now, we quit our jobs and went all in flower farming. That was our second year flower farming. We quit our jobs and we just decided to focus on this and make our money off flowers, which we've done, and we've supported a family of 5. And one of the key aspects of being able to do that was you have to sell your flowers. You've got to find people who want to buy flowers. And where we live, as you saw, it's quite tucked away. It's very hidden. You can't see our place from the road at all. And we just knew that a farm stand was not going to work for us. There is a little bit of traffic on the road that we're on, but it's nothing like, our population in Australia is nothing like, let's say, the US. Our entire population of our country is less than the population of the state of California. So, and the US and Australia have similar size land masses. So when you look at it that way, we just don't have the population to fill a road up with cars that's constantly driving by that might want to buy flowers. So that wasn't an option. It's not that we didn't want to sell wholesale, we just didn't sell wholesale because we couldn't actually grow enough flowers to make a living off selling our flowers at a wholesale price. What we decided to do was we needed to sell retail. That is where the money was. And effectively, we were cutting out that cost of buying flowers. We were cutting out the middle person. It was sort of like a perfect formula: grow your own flowers, sell them retail. So that's what we did. And we actually ended up with a mentor. She saw our channel. This is years ago. She felt sorry for us and she gave me a call and asked if I'd like some help with the florist side of things. I said, yes, please. And we've become good friends and we still chat with each other. She's very encouraging. I try and encourage her a little bit now, but she is years ahead of me. But that was so helpful. And she also does roadside. So she has a florist business, she has a shop front, but she also goes out and sells on the side of the road. And she said, why don't you give it a go? And we were so nervous because not only are you just exposing yourself, you've got to stand on the side of the road with your flowers and just hope people are kind and hope people stop and buy them. You've also got to tick all the boxes with the legalities. We had to go and get permits and permissions. So we did that. It worked out really good. We made a lot of money doing it and we actually got a lot of exposure. So it kind of put our name out there. I mean, some people still wouldn't have a clue in the world who we are if we were by the side of the road, but it did give us some exposure and we did a couple of markets. But anyway, I am very glad that we don't have to do roadside anymore. It's still an option there if we want it. We've maintained the permits. We've still got the permissions. We're just not doing it. And the reasons I'm really happy that we are not doing it, and I'm hoping it stays in last year, is because it is so dependent on the weather. Let's say it pours rain. people aren't going to come and buy flowers. And you're not only is the weather affecting the customers coming to you, the weather is affecting you standing there. Through summer, it is so hot. And and then winter, of course, winter is freezing cold. So we're just really grateful that we don't have to deal with that anymore. And the reason we're not dealing with it anymore is because we changed some business structures around a little bit, and Moroni is now doing garden consulting and garden maintenance, and he's loving it. He feels like that's where his expertise is really being challenged and utilized, and he's loving it, and that's our bread and butter income now. We've still got the florist business open online, and we still will do roadside, especially for Mother's Day and Valentine's Day, and maybe a couple of other occasions. But this brings me into the next point. The second thing I'm really happy to be leaving in 2023 is the plastic wrap. And if you've seen me making bouquets for roadside, you will have noticed that the wrap that I was using was plastic. And the reason for that was the paper wraps on the side of the road, they get so messed up because they're exposed to all the elements. There's all the wind. It was mainly the wind, but also the transport. We were packing bouquets quite tight in the van to get them down roadside, and by the time we got there, anything that had a paper wrap on it was quite crinkled. It just didn't look fresh and crisp. It didn't look florist expensive anymore. So that's why we used the plastic wrap, because it held its shape, it didn't crinkle. It just transported much better. And when you're transporting in water, the water's actually sloshing around on the wrap. The plastic wrap wasn't affected by the water. So that's one thing. I've tucked it away. It is at the top of a shelf. I'm hoping I don't bring it back down again, but it's just there just in case. If I haven't used it in a year, I'll sell it. Maybe somebody else will want to have a go at the plastic wrap. I mean, at this point, I've already got it. If I throw it in the bin, I'm no better than actually using it. At least if it gets used, it was used before it became landfill. So I'm just holding on to it, and we'll wait and see. The next thing that might seem a little bit laughable, you aren't going to believe me. I don't believe myself, but I want to leave the weeds in 2023. And I know that sounds very unrealistic. I don't literally mean suddenly the weeds aren't going to grow anymore this year. What I mean is I am really weeding on a schedule now. I've got a really good schedule for weeding, and I've got some of the beds to the point where they could go no dig. It's still a little bit more work than what you see some others doing. Like Charles Dowding has the most beautiful soil and no weeds. Well, actually, he doesn't profess to have no weeds. He has weeds. He's just on top of it, and it's not as big of a job anymore. That's what we're working towards. But I am really hoping that this year I can, number one, stay on top of the weeds, and I can also keep preparing these beds so that they become healthier and healthier and healthier, and they have less weeds and less disturbance to the soil. That's what I'm hoping for. That's the goal. I guess we'll see in a year's time how that went. And then the final thing that I'm really hoping to leave in 2023, so I want to leave it in the last year, is stress. And it's another thing that you just can't completely eliminate from your life. There's always going to be stressors. But in terms of the farm, we are in our 4th year flower farming now. So in 2024, we will see the end of our 4th year flower farming, and we will begin our 5th year flower farming, because our seasons end in the middle of the year. So we kind of have this cool perspective where we get 2 seasons in each year. You know, we get a taste of the end of one and a taste of the beginning of the next. So we have been just scrambling. That's what the best way I can describe it over the past at least 3 years. And it's always felt like we've had too much to do and nothing's been ready. So we've had all these flowers that we needed to get in or wanted to get in, but we didn't have the beds ready. So we're scrambling to build beds before we have to get these plants in. or something's gone wrong. Like the temporary fence we had to put up, the rabbits just started eating everything suddenly. So we just thought, oh, we've got to get this fence up. So we're scrambling to get this fence up before the rabbits eat it all. It's just been things like that, and just not having a really tight seed starting schedule. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, my strategy for that. And it's just all these things that we're just building a farm, especially when you're doing it yourself. You've got limited resources. You don't really have outside help. It is just exhausting, and it has probably taken us longer than it's taken others, just because we didn't want to have any debt. And we didn't have the money to pay for an employee or anything like that, which I guess shows you that it can be done. You just need to take your time. But one thing moving into this year with the stress thing is the decision to not stress about things. And that's something that it's taken me 4 years to learn, to just relax a little bit about how slow things are going. And it's okay for things to move slowly. Look, it didn't really take me 4 years to get to that. It was sort of like a year or so ago. I sort of thought, it'll get there when it gets there. And the other thing I realized about building this farm is there is no end. This project has no end date. There is at no point going to be the finish line. So why are we racing? Like, what is the actual race that we're doing here? What if there's no finish line, what's the race? So that was something I realized, and just realizing that has really lowered it is stress. It's lowered my stress levels. And it's just nice that we are at a point where we can kind of relax a little bit and just enjoy what we've got and not always feel like we have to keep building. We are building, but we're just doing it slower now, which is really nice. So that's my 4 that I don't want to have to come back into this year. But let's get into the things that I am really excited about for 2024. So I mentioned that I will talk about a way that I'm going to schedule my seeds. And the way I'm going to do that is with moon gardening. And when I first mentioned this to people who have never heard of it, they sort of, you get that vibe that people think you're talking absolute woo-woo. That's kind of what they think. Moon gardening, oh, that's weird. But it's actually really not that weird. It's kind of a very simple concept. And if you think about the way that the oceans the tides are influenced by the phases of the moon, it's the same in plants. So the sap levels in plants will be at different, I guess, levels throughout the different phases of the moon. And it makes sense that the moisture in the plants are also impacted by the phases of the moon, that gravitational pull of the moon. And people at some point worked out what is happening at different phases, just the same way that they've worked out at what's happening with the tides at different phases of the moon. So there's such things as moon calendars, or you can just use the date. If you're familiar with it and you sort of know what's happening when, all you need is what is the date of the new moon each month. That's all you need. So I use a moon gardening calendar, and it's a really easy one. I just move the wheel around to where the new moon is, and then that pretty much sets my schedule. So I know when the root vegetables are going in and the above ground crops. But for me with flowers, the root vegetables are the root crops. So the bulbs, anything that's a bulb, tuber, or a corm, anything like that is classed as a root flower. And then the rest is above ground. And then there's certain times if you're planting, if you wanted to do a cover crop, you want it real fast. So you'd plant it at the time where the sprouting, where this moon calendar says sprouting. I'm actually going to work on a moon calendar that's more specific for flowers, so you can keep an eye out on that. If you're watching this video in the future, just head down to the comments section and I'll pop a link in there so that you can grab one of those once they're ready. So that is how I'm going to be scheduling this year. I'm going to trial it all year. I'm also doing some test beds that I'll show you when I've planted things outside of those dates. and then planted the same plant in the same bed on the right date, and we're going to see what happens. So it's a year-long experiment, so you can follow along and keep up to date with that if you're interested. My next thing is I love gardening. I mean, this is why I'm here. This is why I've been able to do YouTube for this. I think this is like 3 years. This is what I love to do. I love gardening. I love talking about it. It's my favorite thing. And it's also Moroni's favorite thing. And I want to do it every day. And I sort of have this luxury now. I feel like I have this luxury now that there's not as much stress because we haven't finished building the farm, but we've got it to a point where it's good enough to be sort of, ticking over and just working enough for us. We've got it big enough to make an income on it where we don't feel like we have to keep adding. The other thing is it's big enough for me to manage by myself. And it's almost a little bit too big, but it is doable. But the lucky thing is I love doing it and I want to do more of it. I wake up in the morning and all I want to do is go outside into the garden. And sometimes I can't, I've got other things on, but I will quickly walk out and have a little wander around. I might take some photos. I might take a cup of tea out there and just enjoy it for a few moments. But I'm really happy and I feel so grateful to be in this position to do that. And I want to keep doing more of it. So that is the goal, one of the goals, to just make sure if I feel down or something, go out into the garden. It's just so therapeutic. So I'm going to do more of that. This is a bit of a sidestep, but I want to spend more time curating life. I've always enjoyed just waiting for the perfect thing. Like, I'm not much of a shopper. I don't just go shopping and for the sake of shopping and go and buy things. Like, I really only go if I'm looking for something. And sometimes I will look for a very long time for the right item. For example, I've wanted a new doona for my bed, like a new cover, for years, because my old one, I'd made it myself. It was really old, and I needed to replace it. But what I wanted, and I knew I wanted it, and I was prepared to wait, was one of those beautiful big white quilted ones. And it took me 10 years to find it. They're so expensive to buy. They're about $350 upwards to buy new. And I'd sort of got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to have to just spend the money. I know I'm going to love it. I'm going to have it for probably decades. Like, it's worth the money. I'm just going to get it. And then I was in an op shop and I went to a section that I really didn't even know was part of the op shop, looked up and there was a big bundle of like white quilted fabric. And I'm like, what is this? Grab it down. And it was the quilt that I've sort of had in my mind for all these years. And I couldn't believe it. There was no pillowcases or anything, but it was perfect condition, beautiful and white, no stains. It was a king size one. Like, it was just perfect. I looked at the price tag and it was $6. I can't believe it. So it's the one that's on my bed. Well, actually the one on the bed at the moment is a summer one, but this is the winter one. And it is so gorgeous. I love it because it's got the quilted top. So it's not too hot for the mid-season. And then in the winter we put a doona in it and it makes it nice and warm and it's perfect. So that's kind of what I mean by curating life. And there's other things. Like, I was in an op shop more recently, like close to Christmas, and I saw this gorgeous little handmade ornament. It is the tackiest, kitschy thing that you have ever seen. Why would anybody want this? But my heart just sort of, I couldn't leave the shop without this strange little ornament. So I bought it, and I think it was $1. And I am so happy. And I mean, sometimes I think we are worried about, oh, that's so random. Why would we want that? But I think sometimes we're saying that to ourselves because that's what other people would say. Whereas we actually really love the thing. So in curating life, there's lots of things I want to do on the farm. You know, I'd love more seating areas. I'd love more paved areas. I'd love more sort of landscaped areas. But I'm just not prepared to do any of them until I know exactly what it is that's right for that space. And I think I'll do a video on this too, like feeling a space. So that's kind of how I'm doing it. Once I know what needs to be there, I just know and I'll run for it. But I'm just going to settle into life, and the way that I curate little things inside my home, I'm going to start doing that outside as well. So the space is so meaningful. It's us. We're not doing it for anybody else. It's a space that we love. And that's what I mean by curating life. The next is self-care. And that kind of draws in a lot of the things that we're leaving out of this year, because I turned 40 last year, and people are like, oh yeah, your body's going to tell you when you turn 40. And it did. I just don't have the energy I used to have, and I feel a little bit sad about it. I don't think it's completely normal to feel this way. I don't think there's any reason at 40 to be lacking energy and be so tired all the time, other than, I've got other things going on. I went and had another baby, so he's 4 now, but a very adventurous and energetic 4-year-old boy. I haven't had, I wasn't eating at regular times. I was exercising, but it was all over the place. There was just no routine whatsoever. Not sleeping enough because I feel like I don't have enough hours in the day, so I'd sit up late at night doing things I wanted to do. Just all those things I think have sort of added up, and I want to try to work on this. And I'm not just saying that this is for this year. I actually feel like this is a decade project. So by the time I'm 50, I want to have all these things in place where my body's in a really good place, my mind, my mental health, my diet, just everything is in a really good place to move me into my senior years. So by the time I'm 60, I'm in a really good place to be able to garden for the rest of my life. I don't plan to retire, but I've got to look after myself if I'm going to get there. And while I said earlier gardening is very therapeutic, I just feel like there needs to be more than just gardening. So there's a whole broad spectrum of stuff that I need to do to look after myself. And then we move on to growth. So the growth of 2024, what I'm really looking at is, as I mentioned earlier, this year we will move out of our 4th year flower farming and into our 5th year flower farming. And when I first started this channel, even though I'd been gardening for years, I've been gardening since I was sort of a kid. I kind of remember my first veggie patch around the age 11, something like that, 10 or 11. So while I can remember that, and I've been dabbling in plants, we started the flower farm. I really didn't know a lot about flowers. I hadn't really done flowers. It was all vegetables. And at the same time, I had never grown any sort of plant for profit. Whereas we started the flower farm, I had to learn about all the flowers, had to learn how to grow them for profit, had to learn how to sell them. But right at the beginning, I felt like I wasn't in a position to position myself as an expert in that field in any way, shape or form. So the channel was really just watching what we do, follow us on this journey. But I feel like I'm getting to the point where I do have a fair bit of knowledge now, a fair bit of experience. It's nothing like, the people that have 10 to 20 years of experience behind them. But, we're 5 years ahead of somebody who is thinking of starting next season. So I feel like I need to acknowledge that. And you may have noticed I'm starting to put out a few more videos that are just purely educational. So they're not just edutainment, the vlogs with some education thrown in, because I know that everybody's learning stuff from those, which I'm happy that you are. But I feel like we can start doing some more videos this year that are educational, and I feel confident in sharing that knowledge because I feel like I now have enough experience and time behind me to be able to do that. And now as the years go on, it'll just get better and better. So I'm really excited about that. And for me, it's just I feel like we're in a really nice position this year. So it might seem like, 4 to 5 years is a really long time if you're just starting. It's really far away before you're going to feel like that. But the journey has been overwhelming. So in some ways you almost don't notice how much time is passing because you are scrambling so much and trying to learn so much. And there is a considerable amount of stress if you're trying to do what we were doing, you know, making a full-time income off the flowers from day dot. There's a lot of stress in that. If you don't have to do that, that would be best. Like if you don't, but if you want to do it, I mean, you've just seen us do it. It's doable. You can go do it. So we feel happy moving into this year. We feel like we've achieved a lot. There's so many things on the to-do list, and it is never going to end since realizing that there is no finish line for this farm. So it's never going, the to-do list is a progressive list. It is never going to end. So I think now that we've realized that, and the fact that the farm is set up to a level that we're really happy with. I mean, of course, we want that fencing done. We want the cocoon tunnel up. We want the irrigation in. I mean, there's some really big things that we still need to do. But if we don't have those things, what we're doing right now is doable. And it's only going to get better, and it's only going to get easier. Well, I shouldn't say that, should I? I should not tempt fate that it's going to get easier, but it is only going to get better. And I'm really excited about the channel this year. I'm excited about where we're headed. I hope you'll continue to follow along. I love this community that we're building. I feel like I have the most beautiful, nicest subscribers and people leaving comments. I love you all. I am so happy I get to do this, and we will see you in the next video.